if they overstay their visas. Around 130,000 international students and their families will be contacted by text or email, telling them they must leave the UK if they have no right to remain. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says some are wrongly claiming asylum when nothing has changed in their home countries. A trend, she warns, is putting pressure on asylum accommodation. But refugee charities say many claims are genuine and students may only feel safe to seek protection once they reach the UK. Well, breaking in the last hour or so, Epping Council has been denied permission to appeal over asylum seekers being housed at the Bell Hotel. The Court of Appeal ruled against the council, which has vowed to keep fighting, saying the site breaches planning control and harms the local community. The hotel has, of course, been at the centre of protests since earlier this summer, when an asylum seeker was charged with the alleged sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. The government is under fire for making almost no progress on its promised inquiry into grooming gangs. The Home Office Minister Jess Phillips told MPs the search for a chair is in its final stages now and that victims will help approve that appointment. She insisted the probe will leave no stone unturned and will examine officials accused of covering up abuse. But the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp said survivors feel left in the dark, and he accused ministers of being, quote, dragged kicking and screaming every step of the way. Boris Johnson has been speaking to us here at GB News, and he says the war in Ukraine could be over by the end of the year, but only if Donald Trump toughens sanctions on Moscow. The former Prime Minister told GB News that Putin's position is much weaker than people actually think, and that Russia is facing a fuel shortage, rising inflation and failures on the battlefield. Mr Johnson also said he would back British troops on the ground in Ukraine, but only in the context of a secure peace settlement.
They remain absolutely heroic. After more than 3 years of war, they are still unbeaten. Putin still holds less than 20% of their country. He still can't capture those bits of the east, you know, Pokrovsk, all that bit around there that everybody said he was going to get about a year ago. He's making glacial progress.
And North Korea's Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing to join China's largest ever military parade. His rare trip will see him share the stage with Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin and more than 20 other world leaders. Tomorrow's Victory Day event marks 80 years since Japan's surrender in World War II. Tens of thousands of troops will march through Tiananmen Square, showcasing China's newest tanks, aircraft and anti-drone systems. Western leaders, though, are staying away in protest over Russia's war in Ukraine. Those are the latest headlines. I'll hand you straight over now to Jacob.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Following Donald Trump's press conference moments ago, I'll be joined by Ambassador John Bolton, a man who has advised presidents from Reagan to Trump on matters of national security. Is the US on a verge of an all-out war? And is Narendra Modi rubbing shoulders with Putin and Xi Jinping something we should be worried about? Ambassador Bolton joins me momentarily. And two-tier justice is back in the news, but today the Lord Chancellor seems to be getting serious about tackling it. New powers will be bestowed on the Justice Secretary to veto guidance from the Sentencing Council. But will this put politicians back in charge of decision-making or risk politicising the judicial system? Also tonight,
We're bringing forward new immigration rules this week to temporarily suspend new applications under the existing dedicated refugee family reunion route.
the Home Secretary puts a stop to the family refugee scheme in the government's latest bid to curb illegal migration. But will this move have any effect on the numbers coming illegally? Plus, whom do the police really serve? With two-tier justice back in the news and a man saying he was forced to pay £12,000 to install his own CCTV because the police wouldn't catch his thieves, is it time the police reassess their priorities? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most forthright panel, the businessman and former Labour candidate Kevin Craig and the former Conservative MP Anna Firth. As ever, let me know your views. You know how to do it. mailmogs@gbnews.com. But now, just a moment ago, Donald Trump very kindly joined GBNews Live to tell us that he is going to have Space Command moving from Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama. And earlier this week, all sorts of things have been going on abroad. India's Prime Minister Modi appears to be returning to the non-aligned approach India followed in the 1970s, cozying up to Russia and China while relations with the US decline. He has apparently recently refused to take President Trump's calls while he was pictured holding hands with President Putin at a summit in China this week. I hope he counted his fingers afterwards. President Trump may pride himself on the art of the deal, but has its tough love approach instead driven one of America's most important partners directly into the arms of its adversaries? Well, I'm joined now by the former United States National Security Advisor, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining me.
Glad to be with you.
The announcement we've had on the Space Centre is interesting, but it's not of fundamental importance, other than it scotches the rumours that President Trump was unwell.
Right. Look, this is something that's been argued about for some time. Alabama is really the starting point of America's space program right after World War II, is a logical place. So is Colorado, where the Air Force Academy and major Air Force headquarters arrangements are. And to say that politics didn't enter into the decision in the Biden administration to put it in Colorado would be just as wrong as saying this is purely political. The main thing is to get it located, get it functioning fully, and not have any gap in coverage or command and control during the transition.
Now, you were National Security Advisor to Donald Trump. Do you think national security of the United States, and therefore of the Western world, is currently better than it was before Donald Trump became president, or worse?
Well, I think it's mixed. I think certainly in some respects it is better, but in others it's not. I think overall we still don't have the adequate level of defense spending that we need, and I think the West as a whole needs more. I don't think we're doing the right thing by Ukraine at this point, and I think that has knock-on effects all around the world, particularly in China, where they watch what the West is doing in Ukraine and see openings against Taiwan and the South China Sea and elsewhere. So I think in the Middle East, I applauded the decision to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. I've thought it something that should be done for a long time. So it's a complex picture.
And to what extent should we be worried about what's going on in Peking at the moment, with a lot of people that America needs to get on with concentrating around President Xi, particularly Modi? How important is it that India is on our side rather than their side? Or is this just India doing what it's done basically post-independence, of trying to go through its own middle course?
Well, this series of events this week in Beijing is really part of an overall Chinese propaganda effort to rewrite the history of the conclusion of World War II and what followed from that, and the role and the legitimacy of the Communist Party in China, but also along its Indo-Pacific periphery. So that part wasn't going to be good news to begin with, especially with the display of weaponry we're going to see tomorrow, recalling parades of old through Red Square in Moscow. Modi's participation is disturbing, and it does reflect, I think, the outrage that they feel in India over several things. Number one, the 25% tariff that Trump imposed for their purchases of Russian oil and gas. Before that, the 25% tariff that Trump imposed because they hadn't reached a deal in their negotiations, as Britain and others did. And before that, outrage at Trump's claim that he had resolved the latest escalation in military activity between India and Pakistan after a terrorist attack in Kashmir. So what this has done in sum is drive Modi and India back toward Russia, back toward that Cold War relationship after years and years of trying to prize them away, and sent him to Beijing for the first time in 7 years to hold hands with Xi Jinping. I don't think that's as serious. I think India appreciates China as an adversary, but the look is the U.S. is not part of this, nor is the West as a whole, and that is bad news.
And the relationship between India and Russia is a very important one. As I understand, the Indian armed forces are very dependent on Russian equipment. Keeping fuel prices down, therefore getting cheap oil, is fundamental to Modi's electoral appeal. What could he have done? What could Modi have done? What could the West have done to have both helped Modi electorally with his population, but also to have put pressure on Russia? How could that circle have been squared?
Well, I think the mistake was made long ago, both by Europe and the United States, in the way the sanction system was set up on Russia dealing with oil and gas purchases, because Joe Biden and European leaders didn't want the price of gasoline at the pump to go up, while at the same time they wanted to restrict Russian sales of oil. They set up a system that forbade the purchase of oil in Europe, Britain, the U.S., but permitted it internationally so long as it was below $60 a barrel, which was at that point and still is below the world market price. So, of course, other nations were not violating our sanctions when they purchased it. We could have said we're just going to try and forbid all sales of Russian oil. It was particularly in India's case where a number of their business people bought it at a cheap price, refined it, processed it, and then sold it on world markets at the world market price. Again, that didn't violate the sanctions we wrote because we wrote the sanctions poorly. But I agree completely that while India shouldn't be buying this oil and gas, we could have done what we did in the first Trump term when we put sanctions back on Iran. We gave limited exceptions to some countries to help deal with losing that source. I think if we were following a comprehensive strategy on Ukraine and the world as a whole, we should have thought of that years ago.
And that all comes back to Ukraine, and Boris Johnson's given an interview today, which I think we might have a clip of, and then I'll ask for your thoughts on that.
The first thing to say about the Ukrainians is that they remain absolutely heroic. Putin still holds less than 20% of their country. He's making glacial progress.
But he's demanding bits that he hasn't even got yet.
He's being reversed. And whatever people say about Trump, to be fair to him, has actually continued to let the flow of weapons go to the Ukraine, which is the most important thing. I think what is needed now is for Donald Trump to follow his instincts, really toughen up on economic sanctions, and I think that Putin is in a much, much weaker position than people say.
Well, there are two things from that, really, I'd like to ask you about. One is, do you think Donald Trump's instincts really are to help the Ukrainians and defeat Trump and defeat Putin? And secondly, do you think that the war could end by the end of this year?
Well, I think what Trump is doing now is trying to get out of the mess he made for himself by saying he could bring a ceasefire in the war, an end to the war in 24 hours. He didn't do that. He hasn't done it in 7 months. And I think he was played very badly by Putin in Alaska. I think it was a real setback. But because his sense is this is a failure for his efforts, I think he'll want to extract himself. As Boris said, if the U.S. keeps selling weapons to Europe, which then passes them on to Ukraine, that's good. It's also critical we continue to supply intelligence to Ukraine, as to which there's next to no marginal cost for us, but which the Ukrainians very much depend on it. It's possible he will still sanction Russia. I consider that less likely than that he'll just distance himself from it. And I don't see how you get to an end of the war by the end of this year. I don't think Russia is going to be in a mood to negotiate as long as their troops are moving forward, even glacially, as Boris said. There's no doubt about that. He wants Ukraine as part of the Soviet Empire, the Russian Empire. That's what he's trying to recreate.
And do you think that Donald Trump is still overly impressed by Putin and still thinks that he's a man he can do business with? Or has he realized that actually Putin is somebody who, when you sup with, you use a very long spoon?
Well, I think he was moving in that direction before the Alaska summit. I think that old KGB training came through for Putin again. I think at this point, Trump is really in a pox on both their houses position. He ascribes effectively moral equivalency to Zelensky as being one of the reasons the war began, which is inexplicable. And he doesn't see how he can break through, so he'll try and just pull back.
And is this a reflection of American public opinion? Are the American people fed up with America getting involved in the cost and the difficulty of overseas engagements, and that therefore this isolationism or this equivalence between Putin and Zelensky isn't a failure of Trump, it's just a reality of American politics at the moment?
There is certainly a segment of the American body politic that does think that way. I think J.D. Vance, the vice president, is emblematic of that. But within Congress, and I think within the body politic as a whole, people see the Ukrainians are victims of unprovoked aggression, and they're still very sympathetic to them. So with a different Republican president, I think you'd see much stronger support for Ukraine.
All right. Well, Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much for joining me again. It's perfect timing with your president giving us an interview immediately beforehand. Thank you very much. Coming up in just a moment, two-tier justice is back in the news. But today, the Lord Chancellor seems to be getting serious about tackling it. New powers will be bestowed on the Justice Secretary to stop guidance coming from the Sentencing Council. But will this put politicians back in charge of decision-making or simply risk politicising the justice system?
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I thought, well, why not? It's a very ambitious project, but I'm not surprised it's so many years behind schedule, and the sheer cost of it is amazing. But it's a shame it looks like it might not be going ahead, but there are a few countries they can use as a bit of a backup.
Oh, Eddie, we've got some images here of you on the screen. Do you remember these moments here?
Oh, I remember them well. It's nearly 38 years ago, back in Calgary, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday.
Was that the 19... So Eddie, just for the audience to know who you are the first person to represent Great Britain in Olympic ski jumping. That's right. So was it 1988? Was this your first performance we can see here?
It was. I think it was the small hill, that one, and on the 70-metre, and then a week later I did the 90-metre. So, yeah, I became Britain's first ever Olympic ski jumper. So I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh, well, absolutely. Look at those scenes. They're absolutely glorious, Eddie. Love to see it. Well, just go back to our previous topic there for a second. So I'm guessing you have seen some of the facilities around the world. Where seems like a sensible place to have this? Because, of course, we're considering South Korea and other countries as well. Where would you pick this? What would be the best location in your experience, Eddie?
Well, actually, I can't remember the year, but at least 10 to 15 years ago, I commentated on the Asian Olympics, and I was commentating when it was in Kazakhstan, in Almaty. Right. So that's another place that they could use for the Asian Olympics. Unfortunately, in the ski jumping event where I was commentating, there were only 12 jumpers taking part. So it was a very, very small competition, but it was great fun. And they do have a ski jump in Kazakhstan, so maybe they can use that as well as a backup.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. We've had some mail mogs come in on the previous discussion because we were talking about Donald Trump. And Peter says, Boris Johnson still wants to be Churchill. Why doesn't he go and join up in Ukraine if he cares so much? He's not too old. Well, he's older than I am, and I'm certainly too old. Anyway, and then on US-India, Sam says India has been on the side of Russia since the beginning. They have refused to condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine, and the USA has put tariffs on India for buying Russian gas and oil. So it's not a big surprise to see them being cosy with China. They're holding hands with Putin really is a bit much. Mind you, I'm not too keen on holding hands anyway. It's been announced that new rules will allow the Lord Chancellor to stop the Sentencing Council from issuing new guidelines without her explicit approval. Both the Justice Secretary, that is to say the Lord Chancellor, and the Lord Chief Justice must approve future guidelines before they can be enforced by judges. Calls to limit the power of the Sentencing Council arose earlier this year when the Lord Chancellor, Shabana Mahmood, blocked the Council's guidance that would have required judges to consider the backgrounds of offenders from minority groups, women and young adults when issuing sentences, but not automatically those of white men. Shabana Mahmood rightly said policy must be set by parliamentarians who answer to the people. This move seems to me to be the right one. Yes, I know, I hope you're all sitting down. I am supporting a Labour cabinet minister on this occasion. It is for judges to set the sentence in any individual case. That is the independence of the judiciary, but for Parliament to set the parameters. The concept of an independent judiciary depends neither on the separation of powers, which is an American rather than a British constitutional principle, nor upon the judges acting in a vacuum. It merely requires that in any individual case, the law takes its course and that there is no penalty for a judge who rules in a way unfavourable to the Crown. You will all know that until the Glorious Revolution, 1688, judges were appointed at His Majesty's pleasure, and that changed as a consequence of the Glorious Revolution to good behaviour because of the abdication of James II, who had been willing to fire judges who had displeased him. From then on, judges could no longer be arbitrarily removed. It in fact requires a vote in both Houses of Parliament on address to the sovereign to remove a judge, and therefore would only be done for serious malpractice. This is what ensures the independence of the judiciary and ensures that the King and his ministers are subject to the law. However, the judges had and have no power to create law themselves, nor to decide whether to apply the law. That is for Parliament, sometimes for juries, and sentencing is part of the application of the law. Thus, the Sentencing Council has never been more than advisory, because otherwise it's using an extra parliamentary mechanism to fetter the discretion that Parliament has given to judges, not to a bureaucracy. If it were to be authoritative, determinative, then it would be trespassing on the role of politicians. As always, as ever, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm now joined by the barrister Adrian Yalland and my most distinguished panel, the businessman and former Labour candidate Kevin Craig and the former Conservative MP Anna Firth. So, Adrian, let me come to you first. I wonder whether the Sentencing Council now serves any useful purpose, or whether it did beforehand, that it was rather a muddle of Blair's constitutional reforms.
Well, indeed, it was one of the many models of Blair's constitutional reforms. But the purpose of those reforms were, as you very eruditely set out, was to create a separation between Parliament, who historically would set the sentencing guidelines, the sentencing tariffs in statute itself, and the idea that politicians can sometimes make decisions in the heat of the moment, and that what we need is a cool, calm, reflective approach to sentencing. That was the purpose of the Sentencing Council that produced guidelines. Each individual offence has a guideline, and of course, depending upon the culpability of the defendant and the harm caused by the offence, the judge has discretion within those parameters to hand down the sentence that he feels is fit.
And the judge, even now, has the discretion to ignore the sentencing guidelines and go beyond them, because Parliament says what the maximum sentence is. And absolutely, you're right. In the heat of the moment, sometimes MPs pass a law, Dangerous Dogs Act comes to mind, that creates a criminal offence, creates a penalty for it, and then the judges have to pick that up. But that's part of the democratic system, isn't it? And if people then think this is a ridiculous law, they can campaign to have it repealed. But it's not for the judges to say, well, we don't like that law, and therefore this person has had a dangerous dog and ought to get 6 months in prison because that's what Parliament said. We're simply going to say, no, we're not doing it. That's not for judges. Occasionally juries can do that, but not judges.
Well, I think the point that you're making there is you're actually referring to Section 59 of the Sentencing Act, which the last Conservative government quite properly brought in, which said that judges are obliged to follow the sentencing guidelines unless the judge feels that it is contrary to the interests of justice to do so. So at this moment in time, the sentencing guidelines themselves are always subject to a greater test, which is it in the interest of justice to follow the guideline?
And crucially, juries, one of our great safeguards, can decide whatever Parliament passes simply to find somebody not guilty against all the evidence, and then no consequences follow at all. But that's for, again, a jury, but not for a judge to do that.
Indeed.
A judge couldn't properly do that.
No.
Now, let me bring my panel in. Kevin, you haven't fainted by the fact that I'm supporting one of your socialist friends.
I am asking for a stiff drink, Jacob, because I agreed with every word of your monologue today, and that doesn't happen very often.
That's very dangerous.
But I do think, and I saw it recently with some of your comments around the discussion when a recent verdict was handed down by a jury on a Labour councillor who'd been accused of some offences, that it's important for people across the spectrum to keep reminding the public of the independence of our judiciary, that we are not like the United States. And I'm very happy to see a Labour Justice Secretary listening to the public's concerns about sentencing guidance. And I think that the Sentencing Council have had their wings clipped again today, and I'm pleased about it.
This is, it seems to me, something that politicians have got very nervous about, actually exercising the power of politicians. And we've got in the habit of handing all sorts of things over to quangos. And actually, we need to bring power back to politicians who are accountable, rather than pretending there's this group of wise people who can do things for us better.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right, Jacob. I mean, this is an unelected quango. Yes, they're worthy people, but they were making a decision, or attempted to make a decision this year, which was fundamentally discriminatory, in that they asked judges to call for pre-sentence reports, which, according to their background. Now, when I was at the bar, pre-sentence reports were always asked for if a custodial sentence was being contemplated across the board for everybody. The other thing, when I was at the bar, we didn't have a sentencing council. We didn't have the predecessor, the Sentencing Guideline Council. We didn't have the predecessor before that, the Sentencing Advisory Panel. The judges actually came up with the guidelines. The Court of Appeal, the Lord Chief Justice, they came up with the guidelines themselves. Now, I think this Sentencing Council has gone so awry, there's got to be an argument for abolishing it completely. What is the point of having it if it is coming up with guidelines which are plainly discriminatory and not reflected by anything that the public would want it to be doing?
Well, I just wonder whether we've got into a situation where we're too concerned about doing things formally. And one of the great virtues of the British Constitution is it's informal and flexible. And the Sentencing Council goes against the grain of that. It tries to turn something that actually worked really well when informal guidelines were given, but judges had a lot of discretion to something that trammelled people.
Well, indeed. I mean, we're now revisiting history 20 years on from the momentous Blair reforms of the early part of the 2000s. And I think that some of the chickens that were hatched then are now coming home to roost. And I think people are starting to realise that, well, actually, the old way of doing things wasn't quite so bad. The difficulty that I think that we do have is that we have now got used to a situation where there is this detachment somewhat between Parliament, who can set a broad tariff through the statute, and the cool, calm, reflective moment in the sentencing hearing, where the judge is presented with all the information, both of the offence but also the background of the individual. The question is, if we now decide that either by death by 1,000 cuts or simply to abolish the Sentencing Council, are we putting ourselves at a risk where we're going back to the running the risk that actually Parliament could be in danger of passing overly harsh sentences?
I totally accept that concern. But what I would say is, why don't we have the New Zealand system, therefore, where the judges actually come up with the sentencing guidelines and the framework, but it has to be laid before Parliament and debated by Parliament. Then you would address the democratic deficit, but we would save the taxpayer a lot of money in not having another unelected quango. And, you know, let's not forget, Tony Blair said he was going to abolish quangos, and yet he created another 200 while he was in office. A couple of years ago, the amount we were spending as a country on quangos was £350 billion. I mean, that is huge. It's come down a bit since then. That is a huge amount of expenditure.
I think that's a very fair point. And I think that what's happened in society now is that power has become so diffused that it's almost impossible to effect any change, because it doesn't really matter what law Parliament passes. There's always a body that it has to go through in order to be interpreted or implemented, and so nothing ever really seems to change. And I think that's part of the frustration that people are feeling.
We need the great restitution, which I will come back to on future programmes. Anyway, thank you very much to Adrian and my panel in a moment.
We're bringing forward new immigration rules this week to temporarily suspend new applications under the existing dedicated refugee family reunion route.
Surely temporarily to suspend and no split infinitive, but nonetheless, the Home Secretary wants to put a stop to the family refugee scheme in the government's latest bid to curb illegal migration. But will this move have any effect on the numbers coming illegally?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast. Plenty of September sunshine on offer around the Mediterranean at the moment. There are a few showers in Croatia. They'll clear away. And some wet and windy weather across the far north of Portugal and the northwest of Spain. But most of Spain, the Balearics dry and sunny. Italy turning sunny as well after some heavy showers earlier in the week. Now the showers across Croatia, they are clearing away, and much of the Greek islands also fine, dry and sunny. And that'll generally continue throughout this week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. I'm here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Now, as we go through the rest of today, overnight into tomorrow, there will be a drier spell for a short period of time before some wet and windy weather pushes in due to a weather system that's currently just to the southwest of us, but it is going to make its way northeastwards. Before that, most of today's showers will actually die out, leaving some dry weather for a time. Not totally dry, some showery bursts continuing over some southern parts of Scotland, but across central northern parts of Scotland, staying largely dry with some clear skies through much of the night. Elsewhere across England, Wales and Northern Ireland turning cloudy, wet and windy, and with that temperatures not dropping a huge amount here, most places holding up in the mid-teens. Across some parts of Scotland though, where we get those clear skies overnight, it could turn a bit fresh, be a bit of a fresh start to the day. Actually quite a bright picture first thing tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, a very different story. Lots of cloud, lots of rain for eastern and southern parts of Scotland. The rain could be quite heavy, quite persistent through the morning here. Plenty of outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and across much of England and Wales. Some heavy persistent rain affecting some southern counties on your way to work perhaps tomorrow morning. There will also be some strong winds around which could cause some issues, particularly towards coastal parts in the south. Now as we go through the day, the heavy and at times persistent rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue. Elsewhere we're going to see the more persistent rain clearing, but there will be heavy, perhaps even thundery showers following in behind. Some sunshine in between those showers, but always worth factoring in those strong winds, especially in the south. Now as we go through Thursday, it looks like another showery day for many, perhaps a spell of more persistent showery rain feeding across parts of central into eastern England. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers. These will be hit and miss, so some drier, sunnier weather in between. Friday, however, actually looks like a largely dry day for many. Not totally dry, and that's the theme that we take in to at least the start of the weekend.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yesterday, the Home Secretary announced an end to the family asylum reunion rules in her latest bid to deter channel crossings. Here's what she had to say.
Refugee families who arrive are far more likely to be seeking homelessness assistance. And some councils are finding that more than a quarter of their family homelessness applications are linked to refugee family reunion. That is not sustainable.
Ms Cooper is also promising a clampdown on students who are here on asylum claims, directly contacting tens of thousands of foreign students, warning them they face removal from the UK if they remain after their visas expire. However, here's what Yvette Cooper told the House of Commons in 2021.
Those are the dangers that we face. If there aren't the safe legal routes for family reunion, we end up with more people being driven into the arms of these dangerous criminal gangs.
It seems the now Home Secretary's conversion to tightening asylum claims is rather a new one. Is the government really getting serious on asylum claims? Well, my most formidable panel is here, the businessman and former Labour candidate Kevin Craig and the former Conservative MP Anna Firth. Kevin, let me come to you first, because this seems to me to be so confused in terms of policy making that if you are entitled to be an asylum seeker, then it's quite hard to see why your wife isn't in a similar position. And either you believe lots of these asylum claims are valid and we should be taking them, in which case it almost certainly includes families, or they're basically bogus and we should be refusing the lot of them. It's quite hard to see that the husband can come and not the wife, isn't it?
I don't think so, Jacob. And I think that I don't care where Yvette was on this 3 or 4 years ago. What I care now is that she understands and is responding to public concern about this. And a thing that I think is really important for somebody from a Labour perspective to say in this debate is, let's stop pretending that the Labour government's going to fix this after year one. OK, the public at the moment, it's a real massive issue. OK, I understand that. It's not going to be done after 12 or 14 months. And Yvette Cooper is intensively now looking for every lever to try and build on the fact that we're spending less on hotels, we're sending more criminals back, we've seized more boats in France, we're working closer with the French. But a constant message from this government has to be, and you heard Starmer saying today, I don't want those hotels. I think he said words to the effect of, I don't want those hotels near me. I understand why people don't want them. But we're sorting out a long-made problem.
Aren't you doing all the same things that we did that actually don't answer the problem? That the balloon gets squeezed, but it bursts out at another point, because fundamentally we are not going to have a solution to this until we deal with the European Convention on Human Rights and the Refugee Convention. And neither the government that I supported before the last election nor this government are willing to draw that nettle.
I think that it's true that the Labour government sees more merits in the ECHR and some other international agreements ideologically and politically than you and your party. However, we're not doing what the former government did, because we took a view that Rwanda doesn't work and we've spent X million sending 4 people, and we're going to try these measures which we've set out. But I do accept it's not happening fast enough for people, and I wouldn't claim that it was.
I mean, Alan, this is, I think, the problem for us as Conservatives, that we didn't manage to solve it. And I think nobody's going to solve it until they say, OK, we are going to pass laws that the judges will have to follow because they're not going to be overridden by the Human Rights Act, the European Convention on Human Rights and the Refugee Convention as brought into UK law.
I think that's partly true, and I think we will see a change in position on that from the Conservatives at the party conference. I'm sure there's... And in our deportation bill, obviously it's only a bill, we're in opposition, we actually say we are going to disapply the Human Rights Act. But let's not forget, you're right that obviously immigration got out of control under the last government, but we were also on the cusp, I think, of making a real difference, because the only way to stop these boats is to have a proper deterrent. And everybody says, well, Rwanda cost a lot of money. It actually cost less than 2 weeks of having all these illegal migrants in hotels. We should have persisted with the Rwanda scheme. I find it incredibly irritating that now America and other countries are looking at copying it. And Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, what they need to do is swallow their pride, say they were wrong to cancel it, they were wrong also to cancel the Illegal Migration Act, which put in place the second thing we need, which is swift determination.
Well, maybe, I tell you what, maybe they'll do that after the Conservative Party puts its hands up and says that the hotels are ours. It was our innovation. We massively expanded them. So maybe if the Conservative Party does that, we can all hold our breath for another thing that's not going to happen.
But it was Tony Blair who passed all the laws saying that the asylum seekers had to have special conditions and that being in sort of army bases wasn't good enough, hence the hotels. But if we'd carried on with the same rate of progress that we were making in power, we halved the number of hotels by July of last year. There wouldn't be any asylum seekers now in hotels, had, of course, you managed to stop the boats and not cancelled Rwanda.
I go back to the point, and you are a very hard-working, well-respected constituency MP, but what you did very elegantly there was you spoke about the reduction in hotels and you didn't put the context in that the massive increase overall happened under your government. And the fact is, I say to the public, the viewers and the listeners, we're 1 year in, there's a list of things happening, and listen to Yvette Cooper today, she gets it.
She may get it, but she's not willing to do what's necessary. And this is where I think what Nigel Farage is saying is so interesting, because he's saying, not just Rwanda, send them back to Afghanistan. And it's willing, and the Taliban said they're willing to speak to him. I mean, that's a degree of toughness that might actually solve the problem. Are either of our parties willing to be that tough?
I'm not sure about the feasibility or the credibility of some of these proposals being put forward by Nigel Farage. I mean, the Taliban and their human rights record. I mean, and he said the other day, we are a great historic nation, but it's not our responsibility to take care of every person in the world who's got problems. I understand that, but also, what about our British values of integrity, looking after the people who served alongside our military?
All right, my question really, for both of you, very, very briefly, is how squeamish are the British public? Because the Americans have been quite happy for people to go off to El Salvador and put in cages. Will the British people accept that, or is that too much red meat for them?
No, I think the British people have had absolutely enough of this now, and they want
the very last word.
Yeah, they've had enough. I think they also want humanity.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to my panel. Shortly, whom do the police really serve? With two-tier justice back in the news and a man saying he was forced to pay £12,000 to install his own CCTV because the police wouldn't catch his thieves. Is it time the police reassess their priorities? And is it time we celebrated England's forgotten king? You might say, which one?
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's Newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Whom do the police really serve? That question's being asked again as headlines about two-tier justice resurface. Petrol station owner recently revealed he spent £12,000 on his own CCTV system because he claims the police failed to pursue the criminals who targeted him. Following last year's summer riots, YouGov research showed 52% of people had no or minimal trust in the police as perceptions increase that the police are focused on the wrong things. Is it time for the police to reassess not only their priorities, but who they are there to serve? Well, I'm joined now by the former Environment Secretary, Ranjit Wardner, along with my panel, the businessman and former Labour candidate, Kevin Craig, and the former Conservative MP, Anna Firth. Ranjit, thank you very much for coming in to join the 8 to 9 o'clock hour.
Delighted to be on your show.
Moonlighting from the 7 to 8 o'clock show. This seems to me to be really interesting because as Conservatives, we've always had the highest confidence in the police. And then you find the Essex police seem to have the wrong priorities. They're not focusing on people who get petrol stolen from them, but they are focusing on crimes of speech and things like that.
Yeah, I think there's been a shift, hasn't there, from policing our town centres to policing Twitter, which is not what anyone out there really wants. And I think that's all as a result of a shift away from a police force to a police service, which I regret to say has been under a successive string of governments, blue and red, and we've got to really be clear of our own responsibility in this and learn the lessons of what has happened now in order to be stronger in the future.
But we brought in, or the coalition brought in, the police and crime commissioners who were meant to make the police, not in day-to-day policing affairs, but in their policy and in their strategy, more responsive to what the public wanted. It seems to me that over the last 10 years or so, they've got less response to what the public want, and they seem to waste their time not dealing with shoplifting, not dealing with the theft of mobile telephones, but policing Twitter.
Absolutely, and it's all about whether a police commissioner goes native or not. You know, if they see their role as simply defending what the police did yesterday, then they're not doing their job. Their job is to stand up for the people of their county or their area. And too many, I'm afraid, simply do not do that. They see it as a role that is about defending what, in this case, is the indefensible. And what we've seen recently at Heathrow Airport and what we've seen elsewhere, you know, these are just indefensible actions, and people who are elected really ought to take some ownership.
Well, it is quite interesting that there aren't enough armed police in the country, and yet 5 of them go to arrest one man who's put out a tweet they don't like at Heathrow. I think we've got to be careful what we say about that, but I think I can put that point on the record. And it just seems to me there's a lack of connection, Anna, between the police and the public as to what the public want, and the public, therefore, aren't feeling very safe.
I totally agree with you. I think there's been a fundamental shift since COVID, because during COVID, the police's job was actually to police our behaviour. It was all about making sure that there weren't too many people having a picnic or going for too many runs, and that was actually fundamentally very easy. And they've forgotten, COVID is over, we need to go back to the Peelian principles on which the police force was founded. Number 1, of course, is preventing crime and disorder. But number 2, which is just as important, is with the public's approval. Now, turning up, and I don't think this is just an Essex problem, I think this is across the country, turning up at a store in Wrexham and having words with the storekeeper about putting up that sign in his shop about the cabinets is not the police's job. That's not a crime, and it's behaviour that's nothing to do with the police. Having the British Transport Police having a go at the people who apprehended that man, the flasher, and they were actually defending the public. The police are on the wrong side. They've got their priorities wrong. It's as simple as that.
I mean, Kevin, where do we draw the boundaries on freedom of speech, which is, I think, the fundamental part of this? How much leeway ought people to get in what they say on social media?
Lots, Jacob, because, as you heard, the Labour Prime Minister is a believer in free speech. But can I add a dimension to the discussion? The police, our homicide and murder rates are at record low levels. The tone of this discussion tonight is disproportionately conveying a sense of crisis when none of us, I've got 3 respected former Conservative MPs on this panel tonight with me, none of us believe there's any sense in 5 police men or women turning up onto a plane to talk to a comedian. So whatever happened there, let's look into it. The big picture is, I think the police are on the right side, Anna. I think, you know, we thank them for what they're doing. Some serious crime rates are down, and in the Labour government here for at least 4 years, there's a massive commitment to investing in them and trying to raise their morale up, which had suffered a bit under the last 14 years.
But you're absolutely right on murders. But shoplifting is a blight, and it's a cost for all consumers. And actually, I think it was Theresa May's fault who put this £200 limit in.
Indeed.
But that's just crazy that shoplifters can go and get £199 worth and walk out.
Which is why it's a Labour manifesto commitment to tackle this wave of crime aimed at, you know, again, all of us would agree tonight, against shop workers suffering that abuse. That's been a priority for the government. It was in the manifesto. Again, we agree on that. But, you know, again, it's year one and progress is being made. And I'm looking forward to being judged and the government being judged in 4 years on this, but it's not where it needs to be yet, of course.
So I think there are some systemic things, though, that perhaps we'd also agree on. You know, first of all, that shift that we've seen from, you know, COVID perhaps, but perhaps before that too, I think is as a result of the police wanting to almost manage a population rather than enforce the law, uphold and enforce the law. And that's as a result perhaps of the change of the people joining the police. You know, there used to be folks there who were willing to simply uphold and enforce the law, and now we've got more people who are more interested in policy rather than the people they're seeking to serve.
Hasn't Anna got a really very good point? It's actually quite easy for the police to arrest some generally quite polite chap who's put something slightly rude on Twitter or put up a rude sign in his shop. It's quite hard to go out and arrest some thug.
I think it is, and I feel for the police because I think it is a really difficult job, and I think they absolutely, you know, deserve our respect and our support. But they have to tackle the things which are our priorities. Vehicle theft, a classic example, that isn't being tackled adequately.
I always thought the police in the House of Commons were absolutely marvellous. There's a brilliant police lady there who went off duty, tackled a shoplifter and got injured for her pains. And that's the type of policing that I think we all admire.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you to Ranel, Anna and Kevin. The birth of England ought to be remembered, and historians are saying it should be celebrated in schools. Next week marks 1,100 years since King Athelstan unified England in 927 AD. I was there, I remember it well, actually. He was a good chap. Long before the Norman conquest of 1066 that usually dominates classrooms. King Athelstan, the grandson of Alfred, my great hero, Alfred the Great, Somerset man, defeated the Viking kingdom of York, well done that man, and declared himself Rex Anglorum, King of the English. He centralised government, it's not necessarily a good thing, revived learning and the church, and secured his rule with the victory at the Battle of Brun and Burr. Yet his name is hardly known today. Historians, backed by MP Alex Burkhardt, are campaigning for a lasting memorial and national celebrations in 2027 to mark the true foundation of England. As Professor David Woodman of Robinson College, Cambridge, puts it, it's time poor old Athelstan finally got the recognition he deserves. Well, what about Edgar, who was crowned at Bath by St Dunstan as the first King of England? Anyway, that's all from me. Up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, which King of England are you going to be talking about this evening?
Oh, well, the man I wish was the King of England, you, Jacob. So there you go.
That's
but
treason.
Anyway, no, we've got loads on tonight, loads on. Sir Keir Starmer says that we've got free speech in this country. Well, the arrest of Graham Linehan would suggest otherwise, if you ask me. We have also had the case in the last hour or so, a former Labour Party member, chairman of the Fabian Society and treasurer for the Society of Labour Lawyers, blocking Epping Council appealing the decision to keep the illegal migrant hotel open in their area. I've got a big exclusive for you as well. A criminal asylum seeker with paranoid schizophrenia has been released from prison despite experts saying that he still poses a significant danger to the public. What madness are we all living in? And I don't know if you saw this earlier, I certainly did. Yvette Cooper was doing the morning rounds, not on GBNews, of course, despite the fact we're the most popular news channel for the second month running in the country, just saying how much she loves flags. She's got flags everywhere. She would smoke a flag if she could. She'd eat a flag for dinner. She'd drink a cup of flag. She goes on holiday to flags. Anyway, all that and much more coming your way.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Now, as we go through the rest of today, overnight into tomorrow, there will be a drier spell for a short period of time before some wet and windy weather pushes in due to a weather system that's currently just to the southwest of us, but it is going to make its way northeastwards. Before that, most of today's showers will actually die out, leaving some dry weather for a time. Not totally dry, some showery bursts continuing over some southern parts of Scotland, but across central northern parts of Scotland, staying largely dry with some clear skies through much of the night. Elsewhere across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, turning cloudy, wet and windy, and with that, temperatures not dropping a huge amount here, most places holding up in the mid-teens. Across some parts of Scotland, though, where we get those clear skies overnight, it could turn a bit fresh, be a bit of a fresh start to the day. Actually quite a bright picture first thing tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, a very different story. Lots of cloud, lots of rain for eastern and southern parts of Scotland. The rain could be quite heavy, quite persistent through the morning here. Plenty of outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and across much of England and Wales. Some heavy persistent rain affecting some southern counties on your way to work perhaps tomorrow morning. There will also be some strong winds around which could cause some issues, particularly towards coastal parts in the south. Now, as we go through the day, the heavy and at times persistent rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue. Elsewhere, we're going to see the more persistent rain clearing, but there will be heavy, perhaps even thundery showers following in behind. Some sunshine in between those showers, but always worth factoring in those strong winds, especially in the south. Now, as we go through Thursday, it looks like another showery day for many, perhaps a spell of more persistent showery rain feeding across parts of central into eastern England. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers. These will be hit and miss, so some drier, sunnier weather in between. Friday, however, actually looks like a largely dry day for many. Not totally dry, and that's the theme that we take in to at least the start of the weekend.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's our biggest Great British giveaway to date. You could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This 4-berth home from home comes complete with integrated kitchen and bathroom areas and has all of the tech you'd expect from the latest 2025 model. We'll also give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that any adventures you take in your new motorhome are taken in style. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday Five. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight.
Speech in this country has been for a very long time. We're very, very proud of it. We will protect it forever.
Well, comedian Graham Linehan is arrested by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow Airport after some social media posts.
Will it happen in September, Home Secretary?
That's our expectation,
No,
yes.
but can you pledge that it will happen in September?
That is our expectation.
Now, Yvette Cooper can't say definitively whether illegals will be deported to France this month. And I've got a big exclusive for you. A dangerous schizophrenic asylum seeker who threatened a shopkeeper with a broken bottle is going to be released back onto the streets, despite experts saying that he still poses a risk to society. Also,
we actually have Union Jack bunting on our garden shed at the moment. I've got St George's flags, I've got St George's bunting.
I ate a flag for dinner. I drink flags. I'd smoke a flag. I go on holiday to flags. I just love flags. I mean, come on.